It's Ack. It's a show. It's the Ack Show.
Hello, fellow Suzuki. Oh, this is going to be great. Hello, fellow Suzuki owners. Ack here with another episode of the Ack Show. This show features a very detailed description of how to install LED lights on your Samurai or TracKick or Vitara. So that's coming up real soon. First, I wanted to update you on some stuff. Suzuki Melt, we don't know where it's going to be held this year. I'm going to try to find out more about that on my next report. As you can tell in the background, I have bought a tin top. That happened a couple of days ago. It even came with a 1.6 normally aspirated diesel engine from VW. It was pulled out of a Golf. Got it for a pretty good price. Going to be working on that. Well, you can see my posts about it on zuhari.com in the diesel section. It's going to keep me off the street. Well, let's get on with the show. Here now is today's educational presentation.
Installing LED running lights is a very simple task once you know some important facts about your Samurai and how its electrical system works. Your Samurai uses a JSO type flasher unit. American-made cars use an ISO flasher unit. Both types do the same job, but there's one very important difference.
The ISO spec is shown in the center of this graphic. The JSO spec is shown on the left. Note that the ground and positive 12-volt prongs are reversed in each of those. If you insert an ISO mechanical flasher unit into a Samurai and switch on the turn signals, at the least the flasher will not work. Insert an electronic ISO flasher unit and the reverse connector prongs will destroy the flasher electronics and probably blow the fuse. So no matter what kind of lighting you use, always use a JSO style flasher in your Samurai.
Traditional mechanical flashers rely on the physical resistance created by the glowing filaments in the turn signal bulbs to control the flash rate of your turn signals. A bulb burns out, your flashers speed up. It's a clever failure warning system. LED lights are very efficient. They draw much less current for the amount of light they put out. Because of this, when you replace a regular filament bulb with an LED one, the mechanical flasher thinks there's been a filament bulb failure and flashes rapidly. Electronic flasher units have a built-in blinker circuit that operate at the same blink rate no matter what type of lights you use. So you need to install an electronic flasher unit when you use LED lights or a mixture of LED lights and regular bulbs. How do you find a JSO spec electronic flasher? Unfortunately, the auto parts counterperson will not know specifically what you're looking for. They rely on what their computer says it uses, a JSO style mechanical flasher unit for a Suzuki Samurai.
The Novita, formerly known as Trident, EP34 flasher is exactly what you need. It is functionally identical to a mechanical JSO flasher and will also work with regular filament and LED lights. They are available at many auto parts stores, including Advanced Auto Parts, Napa, and others. Do not, I repeat, do not use the EP35 unit no matter what the parts counter guy says. That is the ISO equivalent electronic flasher. It might work with LEDs in a Jeep, but it will not work in a Samurai. Once you have the proper electronic flasher installed, you can begin to replace your running light bulbs with LED replacements. Here is a video of the LEDs operating on my Samurai, the front lamps and the rear lamps, complete with working emergency flashers. Unless you are planning on importing a fancy plug-and-play aftermarket LED fixture from Japan, you will need to do a bit of wiring when converting to LED fixtures. This is the rear bumper portion of the Samurai wiring diagram. To help identify the wire colors, I have mapped out and labeled the wires in the harness that powers the rear lights. Note that there are two tail marker lighting circuits, red-green for the right side tail and marker lights, and red-black for the left side tail and marker lights.
For the most reliable installation, you should use both wires for the tail marker lights on each side of the bumper. The actual wiring is a wrapped bundle of wires that run under the body to the rear bumper. It is easy to work on and can be easily modified for your installation. You can build a new wiring harness for the bumper by splicing into the bundle under the body near the rear of the vehicle, or you can replace the entire underbody part of the harness by splicing at the engine compartment. Whatever you do, I highly recommend that you splice using solder joints and heat shrink tube instead of mechanical joints and electrical tape. Soldering and covering with heat shrink tube will give you an excellent splice that resists vibration damage and exposure to corrosive moisture. Here's a quick solder splicing tutorial. Although you can use mechanical splice connectors, I recommend that you solder or use a waterproof 7-wire connector for splicing into existing wiring. Mechanical splices will not be able to take the exposure to rocks, vibration, or water. Strip about a 1/2 inch or 1 centimeter of insulation off each wire. Cut and slip a 1.5 inch or 3 centimeter piece of heat shrink over one of the wires away from the stripped ends. Securely wrap the 2 exposed wires together. Apply heat, then solder to the joint, letting the solder melt and penetrate the wire strands in the joint. Slide the heat shrink over the splice so that the splice is completely covered. Use a hairdryer set to high heat to heat and shrink the heat shrink tubing firmly into place. You can also use a butane cigarette lighter to heat the heat shrink tubing at a safe distance so that the heat shrink tubing doesn't melt. It may be necessary to rotate the splice to thoroughly heat shrink the heat shrinking tubing on all sides. It's time to talk about preventing epic fails when you install a new rear bumper on your Samurai. There is the strange temptation to use combined stop-turn fixtures when wiring a lighting system in an aftermarket or custom bumper. The assumption goes that by using combined stop-turn lighting fixtures, you can save money by using fewer expensive LED lighting units. Modders trying for a cheap solution often read about trailer lighting converters that combine the stop and turn signal circuits into one wire that does both stop and turn. Unfortunately, the person supplying the information has no real experience wiring a Samurai or any similarly wired vehicle this way. Ultimately, things go downhill from here. Once the converter is installed, the emergency flashers stop working properly. Then the modder tries to fix the problem by changing the wiring around even more. The wiring project ends up turning into a giant, frustrating money pit. The Samurai's wiring system is not designed for using combined stop-turn lights. It needs a separate light for every lighting function. The solution is simple. Do not use a trailer converter unit. Spend the extra money for separate LED turn signal lamps. Wire the bumper lights using the factory wiring system. Yes, you can actually buy kits to do this. The kit contains a set of heat-sinked resistors that you install across the turn signal circuits either under the dashboard or on a turn signal lamp. While the kit will actually work, the resistors must be properly installed in place where the heat they generate will not cause fire damage. Yes, fire damage. Oddly, the resistors actually defeat the power-saving features of LED lighting. The kit may cost slightly less than an electronic flasher, but the installation is much more difficult than simply plugging in a new electronic flasher into a socket. It seems a waste of time and money to buy a kit that can drain your battery just as good as regular lighting, in addition to creating a fire hazard. This is true, and yes, I am guilty of spreading this myth. There is an LED lighting thread at ZukiCrawlers.com that talks about lifting pin 7 on the IC inside the flasher unit. This mod is not necessary. The EP34 can and will drive an all light bulb setup, an all LED setup, and a hybrid mix of LEDs and light bulbs correctly without any mods whatsoever. And the newer Novita EP34 units are encapsulated, so you can't do the mod anyway. Finally, there's a printable web version of this video available at AxFax. Go to axfax.com, Click on Search, then type LED lighting in the search field, then click on the Submit button.
As you probably noticed, I violated a rule that I set down on my first episode, and that rule, which I have written here on this piece of paper, specifically states I will not edit like Ray William Johnson does. Well, I saw a great video by Kevin Bacon, poking fun at millennials. That was the same kind of editing, except Kevin Bacon did it a lot better. So I'm going to try to do it too. Maybe it'll make things a little more intelligent. We'll see what happens. But thank you for listening. We'll see you next time on The Ack Show.